Welcome back to Where's My Sports At? On today's podcast, we are talking Formula One. Our expert analysis today will come from one of the hosts of my favourite F1 podcast, the Idiots of F1, Digby Robinson. Digby, mate, I really appreciate your time. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So can you run me through how the podcast came about?
So Oli was the host, and he and I only really got into F1 once that first season of Drive to Survive came out. We were under that mindset of it's the same people always winning. Who cares about 3 through 20? And then suddenly, because of that TV show, which was a new concept at the time, we fell in love with the other parts of the grid, so you could come in and care about everyone in the grid. Didn't matter who was winning. It was more about fourth, fifth, sixth, etc. Because there was skin in the game now. And we used to watch that together with Ev, who was a long-time F1 fan, just on PlayStation chat every Sunday night. And we would just have the best laughs and the most fun talking about the drivers and impersonating little moments of. And, you always get those moments of, a couple of guys in the pub going, oh, we should start a podcast. But it was consistently making us have such a good time. And in my experience in music and things, I always find if we're having that much fun, there will be other people who enjoy it. It wasn't sporadic fun. It just seemed to be constant good times. And it felt like a bit different. We seemed to want to say things that no one else was really saying, but we could tell weeks down the line, it would slowly come up and people were thinking. So we decided to give it a crack, but we wanted to do it right. Ollie's very good with things like marketing because that's his job. So he organized the logos and presentations of it all, which made it feel a bit more professional. And I did all the social media stuff because I like doing that. And so we had a way to present it like a product before we'd even begun, which I think helped right from the get-go. It felt like if you discovered us, maybe we'd been doing it for a while, when in fact it was just 3 idiots chatting, and it worked because I didn't know what I was talking about, but I had an opinion. Ollie was very inquisitive and was very structured in the way he wanted to learn about things, and Ev had the experience and a lot of the technical answers because he's a really, really smart guy.
It is. And, I think that's sort of what came through, when I found the podcast, is it seemed like a bunch of guys sitting there having a good laugh with each other.
Yeah.
And I thought what was really cool is there's a few that are more sanctioned podcasts around about F1, and they don't say maybe what the average punter is feeling. And I thought that was what's good about your podcast is you actually, and still in a respectful way, you actually said and asked the questions that your average punter was sort of thinking as well. So it sort of resonated with myself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. How did you discover us, by the way?
I was actually on my way to work one day, and my wife had told me about Dax Shepard, his Armchair Expert podcast. So I was like flicking through those, and I found one that he did with Danny Rick, and
I
was
remember
talking about
that
Drive to Survive. And I was like, whoa, what is this Drive to Survive? So I started watching it, and once you get a bit of a taste for it, you want more information and more information and more information. So I was looking for podcasts, and you'd do a bit of a listen to them, no, and then I came across yours, and it was like, wow, this is bloody
awesome.
good. This is, just what I wanted to hear. And actually did comment a few times on Instagram and, joined the chat as well in there.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
It was really good. And then obviously this year the season's back on again, and I went looking for that fix from you guys, and there was nothing. So hence why I reached out to you and said, where are you guys?
I do miss it. It was fun. I miss the original way we did it. And we've obviously we had a slightly new lineup last year, and it had nothing to do with the lineup really being different. It was just the way we ran it like a pretty well-oiled machine. But unfortunately, when you're not getting paid for something, life can get in the way. You've got to prioritize the income. So it can be tiring. When I was over touring in England, when I got to go to Silverstone that day, that was a really long day. Then I had to do the podcast that night, like at 2 a.m, to help the other guys. And I didn't have anything on the next day, so it was fine. But then I had to edit it as well. So you're on a laptop, which is far harder to edit on. You just really got to make time. It would take out hours of the day. And if you don't have that time, it's really hard to keep it up. And I have a lot of free time in my job. But some days I don't. Maybe the Tuesday and Wednesday is busy, and that really messes things up. And by the time the pod comes out, some of the topics
Yep.
are starting to get a bit old, especially how popular TikTok is getting and Instagram. Everyone's just on it immediately, and we just didn't have the time to be able to punch out a podcast by Monday. So
Yep.
that was also a little bit of a problem, but it didn't seem to actually affect people's enjoyment of it. But that was always in the back of our minds.
So you said you changed the format. What do you mean by that?
Well, Ollie had to leave because work got in the way for him. And he was actually,
Mhm.
he and I did the core work. So Ollie would prepare the episode, he'd host the episode, he'd ask the questions in the quiz show and come up, like we would offer topics for the end of it. He would choose what the final, he was like the editor and as such of the pre show. And then I would do the socials and he and I would share the editing. But ultimately, the work was too much for him because he likes to be very prepared. So it would take him a lot longer because he put more thought into it, whereas I was very off the
Mhm.
cuff. And so when he left, because he didn't have the time, the whole workload fell onto me. So I had to prepare the show, I had to write the questions. Then I still had to edit it and had to do the socials. So what ended up happening was the socials fell off. And when you don't have the socials, you don't have the growth. And without the growth, to me, it felt like we weren't doing very well. Not that we weren't getting our usual listeners, everyone was listening, but when we weren't growing, it felt hard for me to keep up that workload without the socials. And then I kind of missed a few episodes because I was busy. And if I was missing them, there was no episode unless Ollie could fill in last minute, which he often couldn't. Yeah. And then I just didn't think I was as good as the host as he was. And I didn't get to have my brash opinion either because I was hosting. So so I enjoyed it more when I wasn't hosting, but I think Ollie would have enjoyed it more if he wasn't hosting too. So it's that kind of thing. Taylor was
Yep.
great. Taylor had lots of insight. He had more insight than me and Ollie. He was more like another Ev. So
Yep.
yeah, it was just not quite. It stopped being worth the effort for me because it just took too much time, and I had to listen to the episode like 5 times. Edit, finding the intro pieces, then finding the bits for the socials. It just became it would eat up a lot of time.
Yes, and you need those different roles within the team, don't you? Like you
Mm.
said, you've got your host, and you've got your person with the opinion, and it is hard to be the person with the opinion if you're also the person who's trying to control the flow of the conversation.
Exactly, yeah.
I feel you. I feel you on that one. So you said that you just started off wanting to record like a chat between the guys about F1,
Yeah.
and did you have any aim or thoughts of where it was going to go? Because you also said just then that it wasn't growing, and that
Mm.
sort of took it away from you. So it sounded like it started off just being a fun catch up, but then you sort of wanted more out of it. Did you have any goals for where it was going to go?
Not initially. We were just happy if maybe 100 people listened to us, if that. And in the beginning, it was like a good little start. And then once I started punching out the reels and the TikToks, we started getting quite an influx of people. I think we peaked at like halfway through the first season. It was like just going up and up and up and up. It was like, wow, I can't believe this is going. And then I noticed there were a few weeks where I dropped the ball. I didn't have time to make the socials, and you just saw it kind of go bang. And if I wasn't pumping out every week, if we weren't catching, not all the reels, not all the TikToks got attention. Sometimes we get 100 views. Sometimes we get 10,000 views. And I don't know if anyone out there listens to you tries to run a page or they want more views. It's so inconsistent and it's so hard just to get 1,000 views. So we were getting good catches on that. Some of them, we had one huge video where we were discussing what's more important, constructors or drivers championships. So we kind of felt if you find something that people can really disagree on,
Mm,
you're winning. So it was almost like the more negative, the better. Like more negative influx of opinions that came in towards us, it almost worked in our favor. So I probably got addicted to the growth, and I thought we really thought we could now make it a thing. It seemed to be we were getting great responses. People were writing in like yourself and giving us really, really great feedback. And I think we realized that maybe this could be something. And when Ollie decided to stop, I think he knew like he didn't want to stop, but he didn't have a choice. So I
mm.
and I didn't, and I knew it was going to be hard work, so I kept at it because I was like, I know this is worth holding on to if I can, but it's just it was just tough. So we haven't actually it's not over. We haven't scrapped the podcast, but we're on hiatus if we can ever get back to the original. Like it might even be the four of us with Taylor included, if he wants, because
Mhm.
I'm sure he'll want to keep doing it. So if Ollie and I ever get the time to work together on it again, which we almost did this year, it almost happened, and then work went to shit for him. So it only lasted a day, that conversation, and then he rang me the next day. He's like, "Sorry, mate, work's gone insane again, so I can't guarantee this. This might happen again, so let's just cool it off for a bit." So hopefully, if he moves up the ranks and gets a bit more time, it'll be back.
And it's yeah, you can get addicted to that growth, but I suppose if you come back and you come back to just doing what you do that you loved, which is you guys catching up together and talking
Mm.
about F1, I think that's what sort of shone through in your
Yeah.
podcast, and it
Well,
must
what's
be hard
interesting,
trying to transition over to a business.
it's interesting because we actually don't even do that anymore. It's a that is a product of the time we had to spend together. And that
Yep.
time not only doesn't exist for the podcast, it doesn't even exist for us to hang out and watch it anymore. Like it's just different. It was a different time. So I think there is a future there somewhere, but we just need our time back. We haven't watched it together for a long time. And that's just life, I guess. Unless people are throwing money at you going, do the podcast, you can't make time because you need to do the other work that provides you with your rent and your food and
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's it. You fit it in when you can, and it's a what does they say? It's like a passion project.
yeah. And I mean, when you're a musician, most things are a passion project, and you just hope to make money from it here and there.
Yeah. Well, hey, you got a lot of projects on it in the wrestling
Yeah,
as well,
yeah,
so good for you, mate. Hey, interesting. You say that you sort of drifted away a bit, and Drive to Survive and F1 became a massive hit when you had the Max Lewis competition. But obviously
mm,
now we've flip flopped from Lewis dominating to Max dominating. And I've always sort of wondered, like we had that crescendo of Drive to Survive driving up the ratings back then. I'd love to see if the ratings are probably going to drop away now. But do you think that possibly the lack of excitement, because there's only so much we can enjoy about watching Gunter Matteo drinking wine, even though I would watch a program of
yeah,
them drinking wine because
yeah.
they're going around. Yeah, do you think that sort of has it made it so interesting for you guys to catch up? Because you catch up once a month and it's going to be the same story. Max has won again.
I think that didn't help. Uh, and it wasn't even Max winning all the time because when we arrived, it was Lewis winning all the time. But I think there was a
Mm,
slight difference. You had faith in Max catching him. Bottas would win more regularly than Checo, but
yep.
everyone seemed to be excited with the position that they were in, no matter where they were on the grid. Whereas last year, different this year, I think, but last year, no one was happy where they were except Max. Even Perez wasn't. So it was like you're watching all these people just not enjoy their results, which doesn't make it fun for anyone. And I think with Drive to Survive, I think with anything that gets a popularity like this and you're getting the punters in, the people who actually don't care about the sport, it's more like it's popular, so I'll go, which you kind of understand more when you're a bit older, but that will eventually go away. So what I hope is that they don't change anything too much to get rid of their old fans, because the old fans, the loyal fans, are the ones that want to stick around and keep watching the racing. Whether it be 5 years or 2 years, that peak of that crowd, that'll eventually come down. So I think it's important for the F1 to remember that and keep that product enjoyable. Because I know it can be very hard not to try and keep changing it once they see those numbers drop. I mean, it
Mm,
might not drop for a while. It's very hard to tell. The Drive to Survive definitely keeps a lot of people engaged who wouldn't necessarily watch. And as Australians, we love just to watch sport. We love to see competition. We love to see a big event. So if they can keep it interesting down here, it's certainly huge. It's always going to be huge in England. Obviously, growing in
mm,
America, it'd be interesting if they can keep that popular in America alive.
mm, and that's something I do want to get around to. But you mentioned about, I suppose loyal, true old fans. Where do you sit in that paradigm? Because you mentioned that you guys sort of came into it with the popularity of Drive to Survive.
Yeah, I'm not a what you'd call an old school loyal fan, but I am someone who I do transition between sports from time to time. But if the substance of the game can hold my entertainment, then I'll always watch. I've watched rugby union slowly transition into an incredibly slow game down here, and I held on for a long time, and I've kind of just stepped away for a bit until that suddenly, like, league's got it. They know, keep it fast, keep it. All the rule changes generally happen to improve the game. I know safety is a big issue with union, but
Mm.
just the amount of downtime, and football can be the same. Just too much injury time and stopping, and it's just hard to watch sometimes, or hard to get behind
Water
by the
carriers.
behavior. Yeah. So if F1's racing is still fun, and the characters are still enjoyable to watch, and we love Danny Rick and Piastri obviously, but then Bottas makes it really fun. You want to tune in and see what he's doing this week. Albon's a great guy to hear talk. That's all important appeal for the F1, I think. Often it's not about the race, it's about everything leading up to the race.
And I think that's what Drive to Survive has given us. It's given us more context, because if you just watch the sport itself, you'd be like, oh, that guy's winning. He's always winning. That guy's coming second most of the time. These other guys are fighting for third, and who knows what else goes on. But it's given a personality to the principals, to the
Yep.
other drivers, and everyone in the paddock. So it has made it more interesting. You can attach yourself to them. But talking about some of the things that you sort of hinted there about, which you don't want them tinkering with. I know you mentioned that you're not happy with the new sprint procedure. What's that about?
Oh,
What are you
I,
happy about
I
with that?
I didn't even realize they changed it. So last year, the sprint weekend, if I remember correctly, went practice, regular
Yes.
qualifier. Then Saturday, we had in the morning sprint qualifier, which was essentially the same, just a bit shorter, the sprint.
Mm-hmm.
Then on Sunday, you had the race.
Mm-hmm.
So the least important bit of all that was probably this, even if you didn't think about it, was the sprint qualifier, which was Saturday morning, which is like probably the least popular time, I guess, to watch it. Plus, it gave you something to watch on the Friday, and it meant that Saturday was all about the sprint. It was all about like today's sprint day, so none of this has anything to do with Friday or Sunday. Now we've got FP1, uh, regular qualifier, I think, or it was sprint qualifier. I can't
Well,
remember the order now.
sprint's Friday, sprint quali's Friday, and
Yeah,
then
and
sprint
then
race Saturday morning. Then
yeah,
yep,
was it? Yeah, Saturday morning was the sprint race. They changed it.
yes,
They moved the sprint qualifier. So it was more like chronological or something. And people missed it. People didn't even know. Like Ollie texted me. He was like, "I had no idea. I've just missed. I've just catching up now." It was a really odd thing. So now there wasn't really any investment on Friday because you had a practice and a sprint qualifier, which really
yeah.
isn't as important as the actual qualifier. And I don't really want to watch two qualifiers a weekend anyway. But something about it being sprint day at least drew us in. Like, yeah, it was just an odd thing. I don't know. I don't think it's a good idea. Um, we talked a lot about the sprints in our
We did.
podcast. And I think there are certain tracks where sprints are a great idea, certain tracks where it's not a good idea. So on the right track, it was really fun. On the wrong track, it was just dreadful. So I just think the timing. I think what they've tried to do is mix it up to make more sense. But in the end, I think it's actually worse than just separating sprint from everything else, so it's a clear difference.
And I think sprint was one of those things you talked about. It's reaction to keeping the fans engaged. It gives you more action over the weekend where there's
Mm.
competitive things going on. It's not just your normal FP1-2 qualifying.
Yeah,
You've actually then got to do the same thing for sprint. So there's more things for fans to watch where people are actually competing against each other. And I think that was the reason it came in. But I don't know if it actually adds anything to the sport for me.
yeah. I think the only place it did add to me was if I was not that I ever got to see a sprint, but if I was going there for the
Mm,
weekend, what you want is
true.
more things to watch than the race. So Friday, Saturday, you're kind of just waiting for qualies, and then you've got the race on Sunday. Whereas with the sprint, it's like, oh, Friday we've got qualifier today. Saturday we've got sprint qualifier, and it's something else to watch. Now I don't know how much we actually talked about it in the end, but we really pushed the idea of just put the girls on, give the girls their qualifier on Friday, give the girls their race on Saturday. So now we're invested in qualies and race, or put put the girls' qualifier on Saturday morning and their race on Sunday morning. So you've got a whole day of things, and that way you are invested because you'd rather watch that than like the Porsche Cup. I'd rather see the girls and have their points mean something towards the final. You know, you can have the drivers and constructors, but the constructors includes the girls' drivers' championship as well.
Ooh, wouldn't that be good?
So I think that's an easy, very easy way to get more eyes on the girls. Sure, you're splitting the men and the women, but it's split anyway. So why not?
People are there for racing. If you like racing, you like racing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And it's watching the girls live. It's just like watching the F3. You can't see them. You just know it's them. So I don't see why
Mm,
they wouldn't just do that instead. But when you're at the track, it's very hard to keep up with what's going on unless you're just watching the screen or you've got a radio
mm,
or something. Otherwise, it's just cars coming by. Even in the
yep.
main race, like you want to be around the screen because you really after the first couple of laps, like when I was at Silverstone and Zoo had that huge crash, I didn't know what happened because they're not showing it on the big screen, and it happened before where we were. So we're standing there for like 45 minutes, going, "What is going on?" And I'm like texting the guys, it's like, "What happened? What happened?" So they were telling me. So it's you can really be a bit lost at the wrong time when it's live.
Yeah, I can imagine. Unless you're in one of those expensive suites that's got all the big screens and everything's going on,
Well,
paying you $1,000 for a ticket.
funny you say that because I happened to be in one of the expensive suites. I was in the British Racing Drivers Club, which is private for the drivers club and their friends. So I was there with a friend who's a driver,
Oh wow.
and it's so packed that you can't go back inside to look at the TV if you're out. We're out on the balcony. Um,
Mm,
and we were stuck there. So it's like we can't go in and check because if we do that, we'll lose our spot out here. So you just kind of had to stand away, and we could see the screen, but again, when it, you have to go and watch the Sky Sport coverage to know exactly what's going on. So you kind of just rely on people to tell you. Silverstone's a
yeah,
giant track, though. You can't actually see much of the track. It's not like Austria where you can almost see the whole track when you're sitting up in the general admission, which is actually why I love going to that one.
that's it. And you're in another country too, so you wouldn't have access to their streaming
No.
app. So yeah, it's not as though you can be like here and watching something at the MCG on your phone and watching
Yeah,
it live as well.
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, hey, one of the other tinkerings that F1's done over the last few years, and I know you guys talked about it, and I'd be interesting to hear your opinion on it. What do you think about DRS? Does it do more harm or good?
Look, I've never really watched it without it, to be honest. But from what I can tell, from our opinion, from what we've heard on TV, it, as much as it encourages overtaking, it also discourages it because you get that DRS train. And what I'm talking about is when about fifth place to 10th place are all so close together that they keep getting DRS in the same place. So you can't get away from anyone, but they also can't
Mm,
take you over either because they're not as fast as you, so they can catch up and then they sit back. So you just have this slinky effect in the middle. So I think it encourages overtakes at very specific points, but ultimately I would actually prefer not to have it because I think it speeds up the process of the overtake. So instead of watching them fight for 5 laps, once they catch them and they've gone, it's
mm,
over.
yeah,
So I mean, I'm not.
good point.
I don't know. It would be better. I think it would be better. I would like to see it without it, just to see what happens. It's really. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
interesting. It's really interesting you say that because I think its intention was to increase the overtaking, and I don't know if
Mm.
overtaking dropped off because the cars got bigger, but the tracks didn't,
Yeah.
and so it was harder to overtake. And I looked at some stats; it said once they brought it in, the overtaking did increase, but it sort of doesn't probably take into account what you're saying about those DRS trains, where it's just like boom, boom, boom each time, so you're not really fighting like you used to so much unless you're Orlando, sorry, not Nando. He's a pretty good fighter.
Yeah, I think when you have that stat, it doesn't take into account. Maybe you and I are fighting, but we're fighting for 6 laps. So there's one overtake in that 6 laps. With maybe DRS, there's
Mm,
3 overtakes, but then it doesn't mean as much because it was pretty easy. You watch the fast
yep.
cars, like you watch Max slice through the field because when they're in DRS, they're so much faster. So I think, yeah, I think it'd be interesting. I mean, I can't compare it, but I can personally, like, I didn't have this. Ev did, certainly. Ev said a lot about the tracks having something to do with that too. The newer tracks, they really encourage overtaking at one corner, not
Hmm.
general. Like, you watch Suzuka, there's plenty of opportunity, Austria and stuff. But then you go to like Monza, and you always overtake at the same point, even though that's one of the older tracks. It was more, the designing seems to be big, long, straight, and then turn, 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 like Vegas, turn, 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 big, long, straight, and that's where they kind of encourage the overtakes. So yeah, I think it would be better without it, but I'm happy to have that debate with someone.
Yeah, I never used to be, but the more I look into it, the more I'm leaning towards yes. It's just creating certain places where it's always happening. And you know what? I saw a video recently because YouTube's sort of your go-to place for finding out stuff about F1.
Yeah.
Just the other stuff that the your mainstream shows don't tell you about. And it seems to be, and I don't know if it's mainly Red Bull, but the designers of the cars are building into the designs, which wasn't the intent, ways to disrupt the air so it undoes the DRS. So they're putting little things next. The DRS was to, I think, reduce the disruption behind the car, so it creates overtakes. And so they've
Mm.
put these other little things on the cars, which actually increases disruption again, which was never the intention, but people have found their way around it, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I yeah, I don't know what to say about that.
That's how cunning people are. You can try and
Yeah.
control a system, and that's I suppose where F1 differs from Indy, which
Well,
is prescribed.
I guess that's what happened with Williams, right? Back in the 90s, they found that little thing to change and were head and shoulders above the rest. But then once it was, yeah, I guess, yeah, Indy's got the rules set in place. F1 kind of waits for someone to do too well and then changes the rule to control the field.
Yes,
Uh,
to make
I
it exciting.
I know a lot of people love to use that argument. Oh, we should just put them in, make it like F3 and make all the cars the same, and we'll just see who the better driver is. But I think what makes the F1 good is that they're not the same cars.
Yes, it's a
And
hard one, isn't it? You'd like that closer competition, but there's also
there's too
the
close. You can be
development
too
that happens.
close. Yeah, you can. It can be
Yeah.
too boring because if you are in 18th in the F3, good luck getting to the front of the pack and saying, "I don't care if you're the best driver in the pack." That's a tough run. So, I think it's important. I think having that constructors trophy is what makes F1 so great. It's just you just hope maybe that cost cap thing is a blessing and a curse all at once, because
I like
teams
it.
that need to use the money don't have the money. It doesn't actually lift the bottom of the pile because they don't actually even have the money to hit the cap. And teams like Mercedes obviously needed the money to compete. So it's there's not always an answer. Sometimes you just gotta bite your tongue and wait it out for a while.
That's and right now it really isn't that broken that it needs fixing, is it?
No, it's give it time. Give it time. I think
Well,
someone like Adrian Newey makes it very hard to compete.
he does, and it's probably probably trying to build a lot of the regulations around him. But
Yeah.
that leads me on to another question I've got for you because you obviously know more than I do. You've been into it more recently for longer. Do you think any teams will challenge Red Bull before the new regulations come in place in 2026? Or we just got another
Uh,
year and a half of the same?
at the moment, I don't think so. Just watch it.
Mm.
Max isn't just ahead of the field. He's 3 seconds in the first lap ahead of the field. That's ridiculous. Perez isn't that. So it's not just the car, it's the combo of the driver and the car. So I can't see anyone catching up enough unless Ferrari suddenly discovered this amazing secret that no one else could. It's short of that. No one's going to catch up.
That's what I think as well. It's you need that major change to reset things, and obviously 2026. I think Red Bull are creating their own engines, then, aren't they?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that could be a bit of a game changer.
Having Newey on your team seems to be the game changer too. If he suddenly left Red Bull and went to Ferrari, probably would make a big difference. I think.
I think so as well. I think they're trying to get him there as well, but who knows if that will actually happen?
Yeah, yeah. I hope it does.
Now,
I mean, all we want as sports fans is change. Unless you're a diehard Max fan or something, you just want change. And although I think
yes,
people think they enjoy someone always winning, I think what people really enjoy is a close contest with a win.
and I think Max, with the style of these ground effects cars, Max's driving style really, really works for the this type of car we have now. And it's you've had Lewis before, and we've had other drivers in the past who are still amongst the field who've been great, like Danny. And it seems to be the cars that Danny is in right now just don't suit his driving style.
No, and everyone kind of forgets how good he started getting at Renault. He started badly, but once they gave him that 2 years, at the end of that 2 years, he was on podiums. He was quite high up in the field. He was often fifth or sixth. So I think we were hoping he would be 1, 2, 3. That we were all thinking, oh, he's not doing very well. And then he moved to McLaren, and then we saw how bad he could really do. Still got a podium. He won at Monza. He's got it in him. I
Mm,
think he left Renault too quickly. He should have stayed. I think if he'd stayed there, they were building a car for him. So I
mm,
think he was scared. I think he thought he was running out of time or something. I think Alonso's proven that you've got plenty of time. Be patient. If he'd just been a bit more patient, you know,
yeah, and
I
stayed with
think.
Red Bull.
Well, either that or stay at Renault. Red Bull probably was
Mm,
his best bet, but I can understand why you'd leave because having to give up that priority spot for Max would have been pretty ego shattering.
definitely would have been. And I feel for the guy. He's not having a good run of luck lately, is he? Not this year, anyway.
No. I mean, yeah, you got what have we? My brother coined a new term. He got strolled on the weekend, and
Mm,
so and it's on often you see Danny angry. He's pretty pissed. He doesn't
he
ever blame
was, and
anyone.
I think what made it worse is that what is it? Lance just didn't even apologise. Didn't seem to
No,
have any sort of contriteness about it. So, but who knows what pressure Lance is under? Maybe there's pressure on him, and Daddy can't keep him in the car if he
yeah,
doesn't
and
perform.
I think we could all see who the problem was. So he was never going to win. I just don't. Danny always takes the blame when it's his fault, and it never harms him. If anything, it just makes people kind of more endearing towards you. So Lance
Yep,
needs that.
definitely. Yes, so maybe Lance is the last of the not so much nepo babies. That's a bit of a cruel saying, but your bought and paid for drivers who may not necessarily justify being there. I know everyone's got big backers, so that's unfair to
Yeah,
say. I know Checo's
yeah,
got big backers, that sort of thing, but
but
we
he's
had
not causing problems.
yes, that's right. We had Mazepin, and now he's
Ah,
getting his.
yes,
So I think Lucky Lance is the last that we've got on there. But I want to hit you up now with I know we've spoken about it before, but I want to revisit it. You mentioned that Haas doesn't spend the full amount because they don't have that amount of money to spend in the
yeah.
salary cap. And I know you're not a fan of maybe another American team coming in, but would be better off getting rid of Haas and putting Andretti in. They've got some money. They're likely to be backed by what is it, GM? And I
Oh
know
yeah,
F1 wants GM in.
yeah. Okay. Well, I think look until that team comes in, it's really hard to tell. I have enjoyed Haas as a team. That just I guess if I don't want to add, yeah, I like the idea of replacing instead of just adding
Mm,
on teams. We don't need more teams. We've already got a pretty slow pack at the back.
yeah,
So I mean, you can say, oh, let's put Andretti in, and they might come in and be wonderful. That might be an awesome thing to have. I don't know. There's a reason they're being shut out. So maybe they're just too hard to deal with. It's too messy. Um, I know that Ev always had a thing against Andretti, so he must be just a prickly guy to have around and cause trouble. I'm not sure,
mm,
but Haas. I mean, I love the drivers at Haas, and we all loved Gunther. So it's like, even though you're not a great team, you could see the potential in the team. And what Ev would always say is they don't have the money to then progress on upgrades like everyone else does. So at the start of the year, you see them performing quite well, and then they just disappear. So I guess if Andretti comes in and they are able to keep upgrading with everyone else, then yeah, it would be great. That would be good for me. But that could be any team. Audi are coming in as well, so maybe Audi. I don't care where the team's from. I personally prefer that they're not American. I like non-American aspects of sport because American sports are so dominant down here in Australia.
They are, but then I think the popularity of F1 right now is, we talked about it before, related to Netflix, which is and global, was it global media, which are
Mm.
American sort of things. So they've saved the sport in some way because it was dying off, and those teams probably could have been sold off for $1. Your back
Yeah,
markers at some stage, but now
yeah,
they're worth mega bucks, partly because of the American injection. But I know what you mean about Americanizing it. I just like I looked into it in prep for today, and it seems that if Andretti had got approval for 2025, they would have had to use another engine manufacturer's engine until 2028 because GM wouldn't have had an engine ready for them
ready.
at that stage. Yeah,
Okay.
so that's maybe when they are looking at bringing them in. But I know it says that what is it? The F1 are really keen to get a big manufacturer like GM, and I think for the sport itself, they're looking to grow it in America. Having
Mm.
a true, genuine American team in there is going
Yeah.
to help sustain that growth. It's gone boom there now. They're giving them three GPs, but they're not giving them a team. I think they have to be sort of wary if they want to keep that popularity up. They've got to give the Americans something to cheer for because Haas isn't based in the US.
No, and Logan Sargent's not worth cheering for either. So either you
He's
need
for
a
Williams.
really you need a successful American driver or a team. I definitely agree with that. Um, I know that they want that money. I mean, personally, I wouldn't be upset if the popularity dropped a bit and the ticket prices kind of went down to being a bit more affordable. Going to Japan and Austria and stuff is way more cheaper and almost more affordable to go to Japan, go to the GP. You get a holiday and the F1.
Mm.
Going down to Melbourne, the ticketing system was a nightmare. It's expensive. The day is they haven't really grown quickly enough, and it's just full of people who don't care about. They're there to be seen, and that's what bugs me about sport when it's overly popular. People are there to be seen, and they get in the way of the people who just want to enjoy the atmosphere and enjoy the races.
Hmm.
America, as much as it's great on the money side of things, it's just I don't know when they take on a European sport, somehow just takes out a little bit of the romance for me. I think their own sport's very romantic, but I don't know if you've ever watched Major League Soccer, but it's not. It doesn't quite have the same presence and romance as the Champions League or the Premier League. It's
Mm.
just a bit.
Yeah.
They always have to change the terminology to fit their perspective, or they never quite get it right. I don't know what it is. They just never quite get the substance of it, and that always bugs me. Maybe they won't this time, but that's just in my experience. So I'm not one that would be pushing for the American team or anything like that. I mean, not that like Haas is an American team, but yeah. So maybe they just need that one team or that one driver to boost their spirits, so they have someone to cling on to once the hoo ha dies down of Netflix.
Yes. Awesome, man. Hey, look, I know you've got to fly because you've got an appointment you've got to be at,
Because
but I really
yeah,
appreciate your time this morning.
no,
It
thanks
was
for having
great
me.
to catch up. Yeah, and I'd love to catch up later on in the season and revisit how everything's going.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll do it after one of the races, and we can pick it all apart. And when I'm not in a rush to get out.
Too easy, man. Appreciate your time. You have a great day.
Thank you. I'll see you later.
See you later.
Bye.